Vampires, werewolves, banshees, all creatures of the dark that inhabit our dreams and instill in us a fear of the night. We lock the doors, turn up the lights, shiver a little, stay inside. Then there is Babak Tafreshi, a different kind of nocturnal character, also emerging when the sun goes down. But unlike his nightmare fellows, he sings a different tune. Says Babak, once we are acquainted with the night, we feel comfortable with the darkness. We realize that there is much to explore. I'm going to trust him on this, since he's been romping through the dark for over 30 years across all 7 continents. He has chased eclipses, auroras, the places where the night sky and night sounds evoke a sense of wilderness and wonder. His goal, to paraphrase our colleague Vince Musi, is to use his work to bridge the divides between art and science, culture and nature, conservation and exploration, to create compelling stories that heighten our appreciation of the night sky. His photographs remind us that there is real beauty in the dark, and that the dark is increasingly endangered. It all started as a young boy in Iran, seeing the moon through a neighbor's telescope. The magic of that moment set him on his course. He went on to study physics at university, but eventually switched to journalism so that he could marry his interest in science, communication, with his love of astronomy. And while he works in the dark, the results have been widely embraced. Babak has been awarded the Lennart Nielsen Award, the Royal Photographic Society Award for Scientific Imaging, and National Geographic's Wayfinder Award. With support from the Society, he is currently at work documenting the environmental impact of light pollution with the goal of publishing the Visual Atlas of Life at Night. And until that project concludes, you can enjoy his other book, The World at Night, done in collaboration with photographers from around the world. Babak believes that the dark has the power to heal, to bring joy and wonder, and for some moments it takes away the stress of the day. Remember that when you leave this evening. Take in that beautiful night sky and thank Babak for making you look up. But first, welcome him to the stage.
Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. Pleasure to be with you here. That's true. I'm considered a nocturnal species. Well, night to many is this eerie, unsafe, dark, uncomfortable environment. But once we get used to it, there's so much to explore that we have never seen. Night reveals the nature's most spectacular and mysterious and least exposed shows, for sure, from the Milky Way, which is hidden to majority of population now worldwide due to light pollution, in harmony to these elegant sounds of nocturnal species. Here we are in Maine, looking at the Milky Way and fireflies. Their population has dropped worldwide, partially due to light pollution. Fireflies are almost global except for Antarctica, but many people can't remember them anymore. Night sky, beyond being a laboratory to astronomers, which it is for sure, it's 50% of our nighttime environment. And from that perspective, like a mountain, a lake, a national park, it has the right and the value to protect, to preserve, not only for our own generation and the next one, not only for stargazers and photographers like me, but for millions of animals and insects which are nocturnal, for birds which are migrating, and they often migrate at nighttime and needs the celestial navigation or natural darkness. Night sky to me, as Kathy mentioned, has been truly um, a stress mitigation that took me away from the pain and the stress of the daytime. I highly recommend you to try it. This is free. You just need a dark sky or something like that. This is in latitude 65 degrees north in Iceland. You're looking at aurora, and time to time it becomes bright enough overhead to create something called aurora crown. It's like rays coming down in different colors. And it may last for a couple of minutes or a bit longer. In 2015, I remember in Iceland, there was a major solar eruption arrived to the Earth, and I was looking at crowns every 10 minutes. That night, it is still completely in my mind, second by second. It was just out of this world. So some of the scenes at night are so unique that can change somebody's life. People coming to my workshops time to time, and their experience is, this is a new life for me. I've never felt like that. Just make a blink. Just blinking life, please. Test that. And this is the lifespan of a human being compared to lifespan of a star. That's how insignificant is our time compared to stars. And that brings some perspective. Tuscany. This is where my work begins. Twilight. Grand Canyon. With this blue band of the Earth's shadow, that's the beginning of the session. As the blue band is coming up, the night develops. This is the shadow of our own atmosphere, the shadow of our own planet in the atmosphere. And later on, you start to see some rays. The crepuscular rays are visible both in evening twilight and also in the morning twilight. This one is in morning in Rio. These huge frigate birds are coming back from the neighboring islands to the shore of Rio while the full moon is setting. A closer view shows as they're just flying above me, it's almost like a Jurassic scene. The previous image showed the anti-crepuscular rays, and this one, the Earth's shadow. Moon is one of the main subjects for many people who photograph at nighttime, but it also creates this brain illusion that we call it moon illusion, because our brain is creating a larger image of the moon compared to what it is. And when you double that with use of telephoto lenses and a foreground that the brain can recognize the size, it creates this really large moon, which is not true, but it's the most beautiful thing that we can see to the sky due to illusion or the perception. Later on in the twilight, we have planets. Brightest planets visible here above Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, Venus and Jupiter. They're in conjunction. In a closer view, you can see they're in conjunction with another celestial body known as Lagoon Nebula, all together in one part of the sky. As twilight develops into something called astronomical twilight, that's the last phase before darkness. Sometimes you can capture even more interesting phenomena, like a new bright comet, Comet McNaught, or Comet Hale-Bopp in 1997 and 2007 were the greatest comets of our time. Since 2007, we didn't have a great comet, and the next one is really due and could be any time in the near future. When a great comet comes, you can see it from major cities, even inside a metropolitan area. Some of my work documents observatories. During the astronomical twilight, the observatories start to research. This is Keck twin telescopes in Mauna Kea, Hawaii, where they have some of the largest telescopes at high altitude. Still in twilight and moonlight in Himalayas, you can see Mount Everest on the left and Amadablam on the right, plus Pleiades or the Seven Sisters star clusters rising. A bit later in twilight, still not completely dark, the Milky Way reveals. We are in Lake Turkana in northern Kenya. Some people call it the cradle of humankind. And as I was taking pictures there, I noticed there are some baby crocodiles nearby. Lake Turkana is home to one of the largest populations of these Nile crocodiles. And look at Venus like a supernova, almost against Milky Way. On the way to Lake Turkana, I had the opportunity to be with some of the locals. We took the long road to cross from southern Kenya to the north. There are some safe and some very unsafe areas, especially near the Marsabit Desert. The reason to do that, I wanted to see the desert on the equator. This is very unique condition to find a desert right on the equator with unique ecosystem. But our car got broke, and then these kids came to us from the nearby village out of curiosity, and we start to talk or work together on the cameras. One of them was very fascinated into photography. Lake Turkana was the destination for a total solar eclipse. I have documented these eclipses in 7 continents, but this one was during a sandstorm. And we didn't see anything other than just a drop of light and sandstorm that dropped almost all the cameras to the ground. But some other eclipses were successful. I documented them in 7 continents. That was the only moment of the eclipse in Kenya that I managed to capture. This is in 2016 in Indonesia, and the little thin clouds against the sun was enough to create this colorful atmospheric phenomena. The wider angle view shows you what is happening. The totality is not that dark. It's almost like the full moon. You see a few stars, and in a close-up, you see the outer area of the corona. As you have probably heard, on April 8th, 2024, we have the next great total solar eclipse crossing the Americas, US, Mexico, and Canada. In 2017, I did a project for National Geographic to capture the Great American Eclipse, which was starting from Oregon. I set 1 camera there, but my assignment was to be on the airplane, to capture the first image before anyone else could see it, and then release it from the air across the media. Then I had another colleague that I sent him to Grand Teton to capture this multi-sequence that was my original idea. So I managed to capture 3 of them from 3 different locations. The work that I do with observatories is to document their environment in order to show people why science matters, why astronomy is important, and why these places need to be in dark sky location. This particular one doesn't need dark sky, it needs high altitude. It's known as ALMA radio telescopes, 66 telescopes working together at altitude of 5,000 meters of Chile and Bolivia border. The main challenge here is, of course, the lack of oxygen. And when I go there, it's mandatory to use oxygen capsule during the night. Time to time, I take it off, just as an experiment. And after 5-10 minutes being on that altitude, your retina doesn't receive enough oxygen as well as the brain, and the night sky becomes darker and darker with few stars. You put it back, and the stars come back to life. It's a very neat game that I always do that up there. It's the best optimal, I would say, altitude for stargazing is about 3,000 meters or 9,000 feet. Above that, you start to lose instead of gaining more. But to the camera is not the case. The higher you go, the less mass of air you have, then in even the same exposure, you reveal more stars, darker sky, more contrast. So that's perfect for the camera. Some of the images are longer exposure. Technically, they take several hours. That on the right side is the result of the same sequence you see on the left side. The time-lapse sequence are stacked together to create a longer exposure from this place in Altiplano on the border of Chile and Bolivia. That appeared on the cover of my previous book. Some of these images are just one single long exposure, and some are stacked. Here is in Panoti, one of the oldest wooden temples in Nepal. And the camera is looking towards north. This is the same image looking towards the pole, but not to the north, to the south. In the southern hemisphere, we don't have any bright star that shows the pole. So the pole in the southern hemisphere is empty without any Polaris. You can have a look at another similar scene here with the long exposure stacked together, which is if you go later on, check my website from the southern hemisphere, which is showing this exactly how the central area is completely empty of stars. One of the common questions I receive on social media is this real? Can we really experience this with our own unaided eyes? You can see the Milky Way like this without the color. So the Grand Teton National Park, and the moon was behind me rising on this single exposure photograph. I could see all the details of the Milky Way, not as many stars as this compared to the background capture in a single exposure of 20 seconds. We can go way beyond the unaided eye limit. So this would be what I experienced per my perception. You could still see the color of the brighter star because our retina at night in low light is using the rods which are not color sensitive. And the cones are only color sensitive when there is a concentrated and bright enough light to activate them. My passion truly started with the first look at the moon, as Kathy mentioned, and that was with a tiny telescope, much smaller than that one. In fact, it was in the second night. The first night, I invited my friends, and they were all interested in the girl next door, so we were looking at another house. But in the second night, I was alone, managed to finally look to the moon. Comet Hale-Bopp in '97 was my first assignment, an image I sold to a magazine, our astronomy magazine in Iran, for the cover, and it became a professional photography career for me. Hale-Bopp was truly remarkable for many people who has done astrophotography because it was visible from almost everywhere around the world, both hemispheres. And we hired a new translator in the magazine later on. During that time, I was teaching astronomy to younger people. She was there in the class, and we invited her to be a part of our editorial team. We were very young. We started dating, and my type of photography changed from short exposure to very long. This one is 9 hours, so I had enough time just to chat with her. Especially this night, the 9 hours made the best establishment for the rest of my life. So and I can still look at some of those slides, and I can see the shift from 10, 20-second exposures on film, high speed, to low speed of ISO 50. And here we are 20 years later. Now we are based in Boston area. My kid, Aban, and my wife, Shadi, they're both very much into astronomy. In fact, he's one of the greatest fans of National Geographic Kids. Once in Iran, I was also teaching photography and astrophotography. I had a TV program for about 10 years, live on space and astronomy, and a community formed. This is a picture that you don't see much of Iran, that people are doing the same kind of life that other places, or amateur astronomers, for example. This mountain really inspired me since my childhood. Mount Damavand is the highest mountain in Iran at altitude of 5,700 meters. It's a very symmetrical volcano, also the symbol of country for uprising, for freedom, also the symbol of the current movement of woman life freedom in Iran, which started last September in a new chapter. In fact, it has a long history in the country. In 2007, I started a project called The World at Night and invited a group of photographers. I was still in Iran. We became a group of 40 photographers in 20 countries, doing this with one goal: to reconnect people with the night sky, to this forgotten part of nature. And also with another message that we are sharing all the same sky. It's like we are under one single roof. And under that, we're just one family of humanity without a religion restriction, without any political borders. We're sharing one roof. And through that window, I started to capture World Heritage sites, like this one near Persepolis in Shiraz, is a tomb of the ancient kings from 2,500 years ago, with Polaris right above them. It's like a timeless image of. And if you look at this image from the same place, there is one subject here, one background celestial object, Pleiades, which is like one window to the universe that we are all sharing. From Iran, now we are in Tikal of Guatemala, and here is Pleiades again. Pleiades was very important to Maya calendars. Maya astronomers were perhaps observing from these temples at top, and the Pleiades was a calendar for marking for them. Now we are not far from here, only probably half an hour from this place in Tuscany, and you can still see Pleiades up there. This was captured in 2015, or in Greece in Meteora. Pleiades on the right, a Perseid meteor on the left side. Some of these celestial objects are in a coordination in the sky that could be observed from anywhere on the planet, and it's a connection between all of us. Here in Portugal, not far from the center of Lisbon, they turned off the light on Blame Tavern that night. That's why you can see Pleiades on the left, far left, next to planet Jupiter. Otherwise, it's too bright. In Yosemite National Park, during a meteor shower, Pleiades is rising above El Capitan and Half Dome in a very dark, starry night. Some of the US national parks are in a pretty good condition from a stargazing and astrophotography point of view. This one is out of focus and shows the color of the stars in this beautiful star cluster, which is filled with young, hot, white-blue stars above petroglyph in Utah, in Arches National Park. Archaeology and astronomy are very well matching together because they're both like time machines. They take us back to our civilization or back to the history of universe. This is a place in central Iran, I would say the best petroglyph site I have ever seen. More than 30,000 petroglyph paintings are found so far, and nobody have heard about it worldwide. It's known as Taymare. You're also looking at winter constellations, including Orion, and on the far right is Pleiades again. But in this place, not far from this magnificent panel of 150 images, including some Ice Age animal, I found another panel of petroglyph which has a story about a wolf, Asiatic cheetah, which is highly endangered. Only 50 of them are left in Iran. 2 lions, probably, snow coming down, and moonlight is illuminating on the panel. Then 5 years later, I noticed there was a live animal in my picture too. I'm not sure if you saw it, it was on the upper left. Let's do this zoom from Eastern Sierra, California, where these basalt columns are. It's known as Devil's Postpile, to a nebula in the background of the sky. I'd like to share with you this perspective of Earth to the universe, how much we can zoom in from a field of view of human eye, which is more than 120, 30 degrees, to something which is only 1/100th of the full moon size, inside this nursery of new stars. Many of these nebulae are the place where the stars are born. And finally, we are going after 6,000 times zoom to a Hubble Space Telescope image. This is the field of view difference between the work I do and what a Hubble Space Telescope can capture. We're back in the US in National Park in Colorado, the Great Sand Dunes. And I'd like to share with you how these are illuminated in such a short exposure, thanks to the moon. Very often I use the ambient light of the moon to illuminate my images in a single exposure. On a single exposure with a quarter moon, which is only 50%, you get enough light to illuminate everything in 10-20 seconds. This is Death Valley National Park in California, the lowest part of North America, which is almost like minus 80 meters. Now look at moonrise and moonset in various places around the world, from Chile to Zion in Utah. As the moon sets, there is a dramatic change of light that most people never seen. At the beginning, I told you this is some of the most mysterious and least exposed sceneries. Even in cities, you can find these opportunities, especially with moon and planets. This video usually is my entry to light pollution, but I have cut it at the end because there were some affairs happening at the upper right, so I don't share it on large screens anymore. It was a hard lesson I noticed in one of the talks. I did an digital assignment for National Geographic to capture some sceneries in DC, and this was from that trip where the full moon was captured right with the Statue of Freedom above the Capitol Hill in a very super telephoto close-up. And then a police officer came right at the best moment asking for my ID, and I was still holding Iranian passport. You don't want to know the rest of the story, but National Geographic identity saved me. So this is in Maui, Haleakala National Park, one of my top favorite locations to do astrophotography because of abundance of beauty and night sky above, and optimal altitude of 3,000 meters or 9,000 feet. Once I was there at around 2 a.m., this supercell was forming over a neighboring island with lightening every second. So I was using this wide-angle image and another camera doing a telephoto close-up time-lapse to capture exactly the same moment with two different cameras. And I was impressed by the dynamic range of the camera at the time to capture the Milky Way, which is pretty faint, with a bright lightening in the same exposure. The close-up is with a 400 millimeter. The other one is a wide angle at around 28 or so. One of my favorite lenses to use at nighttime is between 24 to 28, not too wide angle and not too close up. This is also around 28 millimeter, showing us another layer of lightening. Above lightening, there is a phenomenon very few people have heard of. It's known as red sprite. My work also includes a lot of atmospheric phenomena. And if you look at these ghosts of red light coming, you realize the red sprites are very short phenomena. Many people reported them in the past. Nobody believed. Until 1980s, they were discovered scientifically. And now it's still a challenging subject to capture because they're very faint and very brief. But if you look for an open horizon, clear sky above, a massive thunderstorm, you can capture them from anywhere. Higher up is something called air glow. It's always there, and to photographers it's sometimes very surprising because they think they have captured aurora from a wrong latitude, somewhere on the equator. But this is a natural emission of the Earth atmosphere which is generated through a different mechanism, and it's always there at about 90 kilometers above us. Once in 2013, I managed to capture the most intense, almost crazy air glow that I have ever photographed above the Grand Teton. Air glow is more yellow-orange at the beginning and end of the night and more green during midnight. And to an astronaut, it's always visible. To human eyes, it's completely colorless, but the camera can reveal that. Astronauts always see this glow on top of the Earth. It's exactly at the top of our atmosphere, 90 kilometers, it's almost where we call it the beginning of space. And this place in Grand Teton from a photo by Ansel Adams was very inspiring to me. When I was 16, I always had dreamed to go to this place and capture the same thing that Ansel Adams took, but at nighttime with the stars. Finally, I got there. I realized the trees are now much taller. You don't see the Snake River anymore after 7 decades from that image. Grand Teton and Yellowstone are in latitude similar to Maine in New England, and these areas in the US are sitting under the North Magnetic Pole. That's why in such a low latitude, mid-latitude, you can see aurora. You can see aurora from Maine very frequently. You can at least capture it on camera on the horizon. You just need a slight rise of solar activity, and there it is. There's a program I do every August in Maine called Stargazing and Photography Retreat. Some of the participants are visible now in the foreground, and above them there were these colorless aurora to the eyes, but very pretty to the camera in 5-second exposure. I do about 4 or 5 programs where I teach people about stargazing. I usually try to bring my own family too, to make them more acquainted with the night, and maybe inspire my kid to care more about the night sky. He's at the moment very much into geography. He doesn't want to know more about the stars. Some of you may know this is the sound of loons. Loons are nocturnal birds. and they have been all over Northern Europe and North America. But nowadays, many of them have left their habitat because not only the climate change, but also light pollution. They don't feel safe in places, in lakes with light pollution, with bright LEDs. They leave that place usually. They may come to hunt, but they never nest there. And this is affecting many other species across the spectrum. Look at the bright light coming from cities or car headlights. Some of them we need for our safety, I completely understand, but some are just waste of light. We send it directly up or to the horizon for no reason, sometimes for commercial purposes, sometimes for identity, like here in Las Vegas. These two bats are flying through a light coming out from a casino known as Luxor. And this light has been on for 4 decades now, since 1990s. Every night for 5-6 hours it's going to space. It's supposed to resemble the spirit of Egyptians going to space in middle of Las Vegas. But you can see it even from 30 miles away. It's very clear. You can see it from the space station. And when I got even further away, at around 50 miles, it gradually merged into the light of Las Vegas. So I did this digital story for National Geographic to go from Las Vegas and Los Angeles far enough to see these glows. And on my left side here, you see Los Angeles from 200 miles away. And on the right side is my right side is Las Vegas, almost like sunrise, but this is Las Vegas from 100 miles away. So some of these cities are visible from a very large distance. Death Valley is known as a Dark Sky Park. There is an association known as Dark Sky International, and they give designations to different places around the world to protect these dark sky refuges. And when you look beyond those lights to the opposite direction, it's truly natural. It has the Milky Way, even this gentle light known as zodiacal light, which is a glow coming from dust in the solar system reflecting sunlight. About 60% to 70% of Europeans no longer see the Milky Way, and this number in North America is about 85% lost the ability to see the Milky Way. But it's not only about losing a part of our natural world for our own pleasure. These are vital environment to many species. And that's why we are working on these stories to create more awareness about what is light pollution. Light pollution is not really the light we need, it's the light we waste. And light pollution is not as difficult as climate change or plastic in the ocean. It's a cultural change that how to properly use light at nighttime. Can we switch off light when we don't need it? This is an exhibit we do in Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. If you visit until 2025, have a look. It's in the second floor. I was in charge of the images, and there were a big group of experts providing information. Another part of light pollution now is the number of satellites. We have 4,600 Starlink satellites in space. They are important, of course, for internet, but how many are needed? That's the question we have. I was there for Life at Night project to capture bats at night. Then my image was photobombed by this caravan of Starlink satellites, which is very cool to capture for the first time. Then you start to think about it, What is going to happen when these satellite constellations are complete? Phase 1 is 12,000. Phase 2 is 30,000. Then there are other companies doing this too. Amazon, a Chinese company, another 20,000. So what happens in 10 years? Do we need all these satellites? We're not talking about these science satellites. There are just few hundreds that were very important to monitor Earth, for our environment, for many science research. This is just less than 10% of what is going on at the moment with commercial satellites. And if you take any picture nowadays, especially in the past 3 years, the number has tripled. Any deep sky image of a galaxy from an observatory could end up to something like this. And there are some methods to remove them, very time-taking. But in the future, science of astronomy from the ground would almost stop in visible light unless we do some regulations or find a solution. And then we start to see them with naked eye as well, and any picture of the night sky would include many of these streaks. If you look at the reports from major media about meteor shower, most of those images are in fact satellites, unfortunately. This is a satellite. It looks like a meteor. Above it is Andromeda Galaxy. It's captured from Mono Lake, California. This is Andromeda Galaxy, and the rest are planes and satellites. So the night sky is really dominated by the satellites at the moment in the past 3 years, and this is just the beginning of a new chapter, what is happening in space. We should understand that satellites are very important for our modern life, for science, but the question is, how many commercial satellites do we need? For this project of Life at Night, I went to the Great Smoky to capture fireflies. These are synchronized. They glow together and then they switch off for 8 seconds. This time lapse is about 4 times faster. There's so many fascinating things. It has been very educational to me. For 30 years, I was just looking up. Now I look down as well to realize what is going on our own planet at nighttime. Let me take you back to the day, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.